Welcome all, and thank you for joining today's AWRI webinar. My name is Robin Dixon. I'm a senior viticulturist with the AWRI. And in today's session, we will be talking about vineyard waste and how to manage it. So we'll be talking about disposal options of treated timber posts, alternatives to timber posts, and disposal options for drip line. So today I'm joining you from the beautiful McLaren Vale wine region. It's on Kaurna land, and in the spirit of reconciliation, the AWRI acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. And we pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. I would also like to acknowledge Wine Australia for providing funding and support for webinars via the AWRI Extension Project. So before we jump in, a couple of quick reminders. If you're new to AWRI webinars, if you'd like to provide a comment or ask a question, click on the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom toolbar. Type in your question and click send. So you can put those, send us any questions at any time throughout the webinar, but we will be holding a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Also, this session is being recorded as always, and you will be sent a link that you can view at a later date via the AWRI's YouTube channel. So for anyone who has just joined, welcome. Today's webinar topic is managing vineyard waste. So disposal options for treated timber posts and drip line, and alternative options to timber posts. So today we are joined by Alex Sass, Martin Strandgaard, Mark Gishen, and Uma Preston. So first up, we have Alex Sass, and he will be followed straight after by Martin Strandgaard. So all of you probably know Alex. He is a senior R&D program manager with Wine Australia, where he works with wine and grape producers to identify and invest in projects of importance to the sector, in particular around sustainability. He has previously held roles as chief viticulturist for Adelaide Wines and Constellation Wines, and as viticulturist at the AWRI. He also has a stockpile of CCA posts on his vineyard that he runs in McLaren Vale. And he's working on a project with Martin Strandgaard. So Martin is a senior research fellow at the Australian Forest Operations Research Alliance and at the Forest Research Institute. So thank you, Alex. If you're ready, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks a lot, Robin. And thanks for the invitation to be here today. I assume that most of you have joined this webinar in the hope of hearing of a better solution for that growing stockpile of treated timber posts on your property. But before I get into that, I'll define what I mean when I talk about treated timber posts. I'm really referring to posts treated with a preservative containing copper, chromium, and arsenic, or CCA, which protects the pine timber from insect and fungal attack. Other types of timber posts are used in Australia, but CCA is used in about 90% of vineyards. And it's the copper, chromium, and arsenic bound inside the wood that makes disposal of CCA posts very challenging. Right now, the only legal way to get rid of posts, of CCA posts, is by giving them away or by trucking them to a landfill that is licensed to take them. Landfill disposal, especially in South Australia, is prohibitively expensive for most growers, in part due to the cost of transporting the posts. burning CCA posts is not an option. It can be very bad for your family's health, the environment, and potentially your property value. And also, it's obviously illegal. Unfortunately, and this is a key point, any new solution is at least a couple of years away, but we are working to a very ambitious plan. Until then, the best advice that I can offer is to store the post safely until there is a viable disposal option in your specific region. As you'll hear, disposal options in the future will likely vary from region to region. The great news is that for the first time, significant momentum exists across the wine, timber, forestry and timber preserver industries, as well as through government to tackle the disposal of CCA posts. This is reflected in these 4 initiatives that I'll briefly touch on today. Some of these are underway, some are in development, and I'll explain those shortly. But all of this effort for the first time gives me real confidence that alternative disposal options for CCA posts may become a reality in at least some regions in a few years' time. But first, why isn't there already a better way to get rid of your posts from your stockpile? Well, firstly, we aren't actually aware of any reuse options or disposal alternatives in commercial use internationally that we could just drop in Australia, which means we need to work with new solution providers. To determine whether their business will be profitable, these providers need to know where the posts are and how many tonnes will be available and for how many years. For example, one potential processor that we've spoken with said that they can't justify building a plant unless they get over 1 million posts each year. And we think less than 2 million posts come out of the ground across Australia annually. Taking this example further, this processor would need the post to be transported to their site. So what's the cheapest way to collect and transport the posts? And who's going to pay? State EPA and planning regulations may also be a barrier to new technologies being tried. And new processors will need to work closely with regulators to have their technology accepted. As you can see, it's a very complex problem that we're trying to solve and probably explains why it hasn't been tackled successfully in the past. So let's now look at the 4 initiatives that will hopefully set the groundwork for a new disposal solution for CCA posts. The first is the Timber Circularity Project, where Wine Australia has significant investment along with the forestry, timber and preserver industries. Martin, the next presenter, will cover this project in detail. But I mention it because we really need growers' help to determine the weight of a typical used CCA post. If you'd like to help, and we really do need it, follow the QR code or web link to the webpage, where you find instructions on how you can participate by measuring and weighing 16 random posts in your stockpile. The instructions will tell you how to submit your results as well, and I'm happy to say I'm already getting some results coming through today from another event I attended earlier in the week. The Timber Circularity Project runs for 3 years, but there's an immediate need in some regions where growers are removing unprofitable vineyards due to localised oversupply. We have been discussing options to manage this spike in post stockpiles with regional associations, with the South Australian Wine Industry Association, local councils and the South Australian State Government, including an untested option to store posts in regional hubs. These discussions are ongoing. While it's a South Australian initiative at the moment, we'll be able to learn a lot from this and apply it to other regions if successful. In early 2024, Wine Australia will also produce some targeted communications for growers around the need to store posts safely until these viable disposal solutions are available in their particular regions. A very exciting initiative is planned for early 2024, and that's the development of a competitive tender to encourage potential solution providers to demonstrate their concepts at a lab and ultimately at a commercial scale. We don't have these commercial providers in Australia at the moment. While we have been approached by several claiming to have a solution, we've only seen evidence from one, and that has been at a very small scale. This opportunity that we're proposing early next year should hopefully provide serious businesses with the incentive to develop a commercial solution. Finally, the viability of any end-of-life or reuse recovery option is likely to depend on a degree of financial support for the collection and transport of posts. We all know and understand how expensive transport is across Australia at the moment. So one option for this financial support is through a product stewardship model. Wine Australia has invested with members of the Treated Timber Product Stewardship Group, a voluntary group, to explore how a stewardship model could be developed. The plan document has just been prepared and will now be circulated to government in the hope that it receives funding to develop the actual stewardship model and process. I'll now hand over to Martin from the University of the Sunshine Coast to talk about the Timber Circularity Project in more detail.
Thanks, Alex and Robin. I'm going to just run you through the where we're at the project, covering 5 main issues. Unfortunately, I don't have a presentation due to illness of one of my colleagues. I've taken up this webinar at fairly late notice, so sorry about that. The first point is was mentioned by Alex about how many posts are there and where are they. We've estimated it in Australia there's about 78 million CCA treated posts in wineries in service, and of those about 1.5 million are reach the end of their service life every year. Bit over 50% of those are in South Australia, followed by 23% in New South Wales, 16% in Victoria, and 6% in WA. The quantities in Queensland and Tasmania are about less than 1% of the total. As Alex mentioned, logistics is a key element to the success of any options for dealing with the treated posts, and we've started to examine the options there. We've had a recent discussion with Mulbarton, who are a compost and transport company, and they're offering a service at the moment where they'll dispose of end-of-life treated posts to landfill. I suppose the advantage of going and speaking with them is they've got a business that is actually already dealing with treated posts in bulk. What they do is, in order to reduce the transport costs, they chip the posts up using a tub grinder. Tub grinder is a useful approach because it's relatively insensitive to the presence of metal elements still attached to the posts. The downside is, of course, you need an extra piece of equipment, but they've found that it is a cheaper option to chip up the posts and transport them. I'm intending to do a productivity study in the new year to find out any potential bottlenecks in their system, the productivity of each piece of equipment, etc. And if possible, I'd also like to do a productivity study comparing loading and unloading and transport of whole end-of-life posts as a comparative study. Alex also mentioned regulatory barriers. One thing that you may be aware of or maybe not is that if you go to Bunnings and buy a trailer load of CCA treated posts. You can do what you like with them until you head towards the tip, in which case they suddenly become hazardous waste. We've got a consultant looking at the regulatory barriers, and basically what he's found, we've got a draft report, is that all the state EPAs consider that landfill as currently the only viable option for the end-of-life treated timber. However, the good news was that they're all open to the possibility of alternative uses, and most either are planning or have regulatory pathways to allow for the diversion of treated timber from landfill, which is a critical component. If you want to come up with an option, you need to have a regulatory pathway to allow it. We were concerned about whether there would be limitations on interstate transport of treated timber, because obviously wine regions, there may be large areas of wine grape growing just across a state border, and it may make sense to collect all of the timber from those into the one place. Yes, it's allowed with prior approval and then verification against approval once the material is delivered. The reason for that, of course, is they just don't want you taking it, sending it off interstate and dumping it illegally. The next area is about the opportunities for reuse and of the end-of-life posts. New Zealand has an example of where they have a commercial business reusing winery posts as agricultural posts, and we're very keen to have a look at it, and we will be visiting them early next year to see how they can make a viable business out of it. But they're the only ones that we found who are doing that. As Alex mentioned, there's people trying to give them away in Australia, but it's not been that successful. There's a number of other potential options, including using the posts ground up to make particle board and composites. There's a number of technical issues with the doing that in terms of the CCA interacting with the resins, etc. But they're fairly minor and surmountable issues. The biggest problem is really that those industries deal with hundreds of thousands of tons of unused, fresh from the tree pine. And so us coming up with a couple of thousand tons of CCA treated timber of unknown quality, they're less likely to be interested. There's also a potential issue. If you add CCA, you obviously get the benefits still of the protection from termites and fungi, etc. But you then have to inform the users of the product when they're cutting and sanding it, they have to take appropriate precautions. You're probably thinking, well, if CCA is the problem, then maybe you can remove it from the timber. And one of its advantages and during its service life is that those chemicals are strongly bound to the timber, which is a problem when you want to remove them. There have been various processes that have been tried to remove them, and they can successfully remove over 90% through use of chemical or biological agencies. However, even removing 90% may not be enough for some uses, such as mulch and compost. You still have to dilute it with something. Of course, if you're processing, the more you process the timber, the more the costs increase. And you also can have issues with the usability of the product after it's been through the remediation process. The advantage of this process is there's a potential for that copper, chrome, and arsenic to be extracted and reused. Finally, you can burn the material or have it undergo pyrolysis. Just broadly speaking, the copper and chromium components predominantly stay in the ash during combustion or pyrolysis. As the temperature of the process increases, arsenic is increasingly volatilized. lower temperature, and I'm talking like no more than 300 degrees Celsius operations. In those type of operations, the metals tend to agglomerate and can be removed from the ash and reused. And then the ash cleaned of the metals, heavy metals, can also be used. That's definitely a work in progress. There's a lot of people have been looking at it over the years. Alex mentioned finally the pilot project and touched on some of the issues there. We're looking at having a workshop in early 2024 to try and tease out the viable alternatives. As Alex mentioned, the ones that we've spoken with who are far enough down the chain to be able to work out what a viable system would be. Talking about thousands of tons more than we actually have available regionally in South Australia. Alex touched on a number of the points I was going to make here, but basically we need to set up this pilot project really to set the groundwork for a full-on commercial enterprise. So we need to start looking at it now, because the pilot project itself could take several years for them to even get something of a bigger than a lab scale in production. Okay, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex and Martin. Now I would like to introduce Mark Gishen. So Mark is South Australian Wine Industry Association's Environmental Project Manager, with responsibility across a wide range of policy areas, including water, energy, waste, and emissions reduction. I'll hand over to you now, Mark.
Thank you very much, Robin. I'm really pleased to be able to get to this webinar. Great to see some terrific attendance. I'm going to share my screen and just give you a couple of slides. I promise not to kill you all with boredom with lots of text, but there is a fair bit here. We're really talking about alternatives to CCA treated timber posts. This has come up over many recent times. Many times we don't know what the performance is, so it's very hard to make a decision when you're presented with alternatives. So there's this whole recognition of the disposal problem and the potentially hazardous elements related to them. So this is a project that came out after the 2019-2020 bushfire season, where there was some pretty severe damage in some vineyards, particularly in the Adelaide Hills. And this project is aimed at providing basically better information to help people decide between alternatives when they have to rebuild vineyards or for their replacements. And that's really what it's about. And we use specifically some of the experience of the Adelaide Hills growers as part of it. I'll just describe a little bit about how we went through it. So there's three main things that we did. First of all, the work was predominantly done by a team at the University of Adelaide, and we've got a couple of people online from that. But it was also a partnership between Green Industries SA, who've been around this space for a long, long time, along with us, and also the Adelaide Hills wine region. So the research team went through the literature and also to look at the hazards and what were the physical properties relating to the various alternatives that were on the market at the moment, and investigated those. Also, that involved a considerable amount of effort in talking to the commercial suppliers about the characteristics of all the various types of posts you can get, alternatives, Of course, naturally, every one of them will tell you that theirs is the best product since sliced bread, so buy it. But for most people, there's more information required than just that. It can be a fairly career-damaging decision if you pick the wrong one and you have to pull them all out again, for a vineyard manager anyway. The outputs that the project team came up with, they've got an evaluation report that is a lot of the detail around that. That will be available. It's in the final stages of formatting, and we'll be making that publicly available through our website. It basically goes through all the various factors relating to the types of posts that are on the market at the moment, starting with environmental risk, but also looks at price of them, like cost. I make a distinction between cost and potentially price. Lifespan, disposal of them. Recyclability is very different from actually being recycled. So they might theoretically recyclable, but if they're not being recycled, then they might as well be going, or they sometimes do end up in just landfill. But also the emissions, there was a bit of effort put into some of that. A lot of that area is still unknown. But when I talk about price, there is a price of disposal. There is a price of lifespan and depreciation. There's also a price of maintenance that you need to consider into it. So just the cost, the upfront cost, is not the only thing. The second phase was to then conduct a survey, and that was done nationally. It was available nationally. We only had a relatively small response rate of around about 45, and mainly South Australian in that case. But we did have a fairly intense focus group discussion session with some experienced growers in the Adelaide Hills. And that was where we got quite a lot of really good information about what was needed and how it to be presented. So again, there are reports on both of those two things. They'll be made available so people can have a look at those in the future. Probably the key factors that the outputs and helpful information that's coming out of these is a fact sheet series. We've developed 4 fact sheets as a result of it. And these are listed here. So what is the problem with CCA? Why is it a problem? And it looks at when is it a problem? What are the various risks? Then it looks at about post-performance and the factors you need to consider when evaluating the performance of the various posts. And one of the important ones is which post is best for you. Now, there is no single post that I can say to you is the best one for you. It will depend on your circumstances. It'll depend on costs, which will include costs of disposal, which vary enormously across the regions and the state jurisdictions. And so there's no single clear answer to this that applies to everybody. So you really have to sit down and weigh all these things up yourself. And the last one is about what are the end-of-life options. We talked already about currently, you can give them away, you can send them off for landscaping or for other second uses. At the moment, we're still waiting for a satisfactory treatment process that may be able to deal with them at end of life in a more environmentally sustainable manner and with lower environmental risks. So we do cover off what is the current state of that at the moment. Hopefully, we will be seeing some more solutions in the next couple of years. So it will be fantastic when this last fact sheet is certainly out of date and we need to update it with something new that is going to be a lot better. So those resources are all going to be available. They're open. You don't have to be a member of Sawyer to get to this part of the website. They will all be available there. There's either the link, the QR code should also take you straight to it. There's a number of other resources, including a guideline that was developed it was about 12 years ago, about how to store your stockpile of treated timber waste safely. It's been around for a long time. So those are available there. just going to give you now the key messages we got from it under 3 headings. First of all, the decision about them is multifactorial. When you're making a decision about it, of course, it involves the engineering properties, the costs of all aspects of the life cycle, and involves also environmental impacts. And you need to look at it across the whole life cycle. So there is information in those resources that can help you evaluate those. Second thing is that there's limited objective, truly objective information on performance. What we did find is that in practice, the soil type and harvest method was actually irrelevant to the choice made in practice by people. There may be an influence of those factors, but at the moment, the decisions are not made based on any of those. It was pretty irrelevant. And as Alex said, CCA% is used about 90% of the time at the moment. Steel is increasingly being used. There was a clear message there. And we did get a very strong feedback that plastic, and particularly the composites of those, are not that well favoured at the moment, partly because of pure plastics in terms of performance issues. But composites are a real difficulty in terms of recyclability. Whilst you might have 2 components combined together that make a post, and each one of them is recyclable, you've actually got to cut them apart and separate them. And that is causing people to be less favourable towards them. Also, some of them cannot be handled very easily by recyclers at the moment. So it ends up, very often it could well end up in landfill. And that is perhaps not a good thing. There is also the life cycle impact. There are many people don't like plastics because of the life cycle impacts and environmental impacts related to the source of them, which is, of course, fossil fuel. Importantly, growers do recognise the environmental responsibilities and are looking towards these alternatives. It was interesting that about 1/3 of the growers that we came in contact with were not aware of disposal options for CCA timber. In South Australia, there are some licensed, the only way you can do it is to a licensed landfill, and there is a significant cost associated with disposing of those. In terms of the risks, environmental risks, whilst the copper and chromate, that people are concerned about leachability, it's not that's the biggest risk. The greatest risk by a long way is from burning. If you burn them, you're creating ash and fumes, particularly at high temperatures, that can be extremely toxic. And in a bushfire situation, particularly, you can end up with a pretty nasty cloud with toxic fumes in it, plus a lot of ash sitting in the vineyard in dispersed little bundles across a whole vineyard landscape. And that then creates WHS issues for subsequent working on the land. So for those reasons, you may want to try and move away from them. But please, when you make your decisions, bear in mind, use these fact sheets and see if they can help you make decisions. But of course, we're also available. If you have any other direct inquiries, you can always come through our website. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mark. Wonderful. Now I'd like to introduce Uma Preston. So Uma has a passion for Australian manufacturing and sustainable agriculture, and she established Sustaining Endeavour in 2016 to organise the recoiling and closed-loop recycling of end-of-life drip lines for South Australian farmers. This journey has been sustained through the ups and downs of volatile plastics market, supported by a key manufacturing partner, Netafim. Uma is now excited to be working closely with Netafim to coordinate all aspects of the Netafim recoil service across Australia and New Zealand. Welcome, Uma. Now, Uma, are you there? We can't hear you. You're currently on mute. Looks like we're having some trouble. Oh, here's
Hi everybody. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now.
Thank you.
And yeah, so I guess it's been. Thank you very much for having me to speak today, Robin, and to hear from the fellow panelists. It was really interesting to hear about the hope that there is for dealing with the CCA problem, and it's only going to keep. A solution will only emerge if everybody keeps working together and collaborating. So it's pleasing to see.
Uma, we're just still waiting. Oh, here you go. Great. Thank you.
So I've just got a few slides. Obviously, recoiling of dripline is further along, I guess, but there have always been a few problems and hurdles, and I will allude to some of those and explain how Netafim have been addressing them in the last few years. Okay, here we go. Are we all good? Yeah, okay, here we go. Yes, so I'm Uma Preston. I've been organising recoiling of drip lines for quite a few years now, actually since 2016, when I first met Peter Durand from Netafim, and we've been collaborating together as well as with the operations manager, Adam Roberts, and I'm very grateful to both of them because as a team, we've been coordinating the recoil service and we've made some really significant gains. Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to move on to the next slide. Oh. There we go. It's sort of, for some reason, there's a bit of a delay there. Sorry about that. So why are Netafim so passionate about recycling? And I guess myself personally as well. We do it because we seek to prevent old drip lines accumulating in the landscape. You know, I guess they can harbour weeds and so on, and I guess just form an unsightly mess. We aim to provide clients with a viable alternative to landfilling. And ensure that drip lines are seen as a resource at the time of replacement. I think that point is really quite important, so that old drip lines, once they do become end of life, are seen as a resource rather than as a waste, a problematic waste. So we see it as being really important to link what we're doing very closely with Australian recyclers. We only use Australian recyclers for processing drip lines, and also link with a wider group of manufacturers through the plastic circular economy. Recycled resins typically have a much lower carbon footprint and reduce the reliance on virgin resins when they are used in making recycled plastic products. So one of the things is that Netafim have been quite unique in the industry in that they acknowledge that they will support using the resin that comes from recycling of drip lines in making new Netafim products. So that's quite a significant commitment. And so yeah, I'm sorry, but my screen's not working, so I think I might just have to speak. Oh. So the closed loop commitment is quite significant. It means that in a volatile plastics market, which is quite competitive, by Netafim making a commitment to keep taking that recycled resin and using it to make new drip lines. It sustains a demand, and it means that regardless of what might be happening internationally in the plastics market or even locally, and whoever else might want or might not want any more recycled resins from dripline, it means that there's always a market. And in some ways, my personal belief is that we live in an age where the world is so limited in virgin resources. If we're going to make something with precious virgin resources, unless we're prepared to take them back and use those again to make the same product, that is the way. That is the only sustainable way you can keep making something into the future. That's the ultimate. That's the bee's knees, if you like, of what we try to aim for. I have a wonderful PowerPoint presentation, and I'm gutted. There we go. It's come up now. We've just got a bit of a delay. So yeah, there's a photo of growers at one of at beautiful Pathway in the southeast, with a full load of drip line that they've recoiled using a Netafim recoiler. There's an example of the plastic resin that's actually in my hands there. And that has come out of a local recycler here in Adelaide. And the photo on the right shows the Netafim team, the operations director there, Adam Roberts, and two members of his team, with some of the equipment that they use for doing the great quality checks that ensure consistent quality products. So I guess it's really, really important. We call our program Netafim Recoil because it's recoiling is actually the backbone of the service, getting customers at that point or just before the product reaches end of life to understand how to actually manage that product and recoil it correctly is really, really critical. So if growers don't recoil properly, but they just retrieve their drip lines at end of life by just dragging them out of the vineyard, as you can see in that photo on the left, it becomes unsafe and unpractical to handle by the recycler, or even just to get it into a truck. If it's recoiled but in very loose bundles, it's unviable to freight. And then the photo on the right just shows using a Netafim recoiler, you can get quite dense and manageable bundles that are much faster. You can make the whole task of retrieval much faster as well. So how Netafim recoil works, we have a process where basically a grower completes a Netafim recoil request form, and that form is available from our website and also from approved Netafim dealerships where the product is sold at that point of sale. Netafim arrange a recoiler. We also have developed a safe Netafim polywinder safe operating procedure, which is available to download from our website. We also then I guess the third step is growers actually recoil their drip lines, and we give them guidance so that that process is successful, so that the material can be recycled successfully. And then finally, we arrange freight for our clients and get that material to our recycling partners. And we also provide guidance on safe loading procedures for that. Just, I guess, it's worth noting, to ensure that recoil drip lines can be recycled, make sure you flush the lines prior to recoiling. That just removes excess dirt, I guess, and means that you save a little bit on your recycling. Detach drip lines from the wire before you start recoiling. Poly joiners, cobra clamps, and inline drippers are okay to leave in as you're recoiling. Recoil as tightly as possible to no more than just over 1 metre in diameter. This means that if we do come up with a recycling plan for you that involves putting your drip lines onto a pallet, a return Netafim pallet, to get them back to our recycling partners that way, they'll fit on to the pallet well. We get you to tie the bundles of drip line in 4 spots to secure them and to ensure that they don't fall apart on handling by our freight partners or by our recyclers. And then, yeah, store bundles neatly in an accessible spot for pickup that's accessible regardless of the weather. So yeah, we basically, it's been such a delight to work with the Netafim team. That's John and Corey from the SA Mildura team. They will help me get recoilers to clients, and also it's been wonderful to be working with and getting to know many of the approved Netafim dealerships who provide a home base for the Netafim recoiler machines, and that's particularly useful for the smaller clients who typically only want a machine for a day. We can't justify freighting machines around for them, and having it available for pickup and return from one of the dealerships is just a great idea. And that's James there at Loxton Irrigation in the Riverland, where we've had quite a few great growers use the recoiler. Oh, I reckon my computer's gone to sleep again. So yeah, safe and efficient recoiling practices are really crucial to what we do. Netafim have been organising recoiling machines and recycling since 2006. There was the original sort of polywinders came from Europe, I believe, and Netafim actually invested in working with a business, Agritech in the Riverland, to make the machines safer. And that ended up seeing the machines vastly improved and made safer. So all our machines are caged, our polywinders are caged, and that means that there's no potential for a broken arm, for example, or worse. We have controls so that we provide guidance as well to growers so that they know what the safe operating practices are. We've invested recently by learning from some growers at TWE and Coonawarra on things that they were doing to adapt the machines. And then we've gone and actually put those into effect by actually engineering controls to make the machines better. And that those controls have reduced strain on the operator who's operating guiding the poly into the machine. And I'm really proud of that, because I think that it just helps with your back. And we only have one back, don't we? So you've got to look after it. Oh, phew, this is a bit annoying, guys. Robin, do you know what I should do? I'll just keep talking, I guess. I'm assuming everyone can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you. Perhaps
Oh.
I try to turn your video off and see if that helps.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But if not, you might have to just talk through it.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so I guess the other things I was going to mention were that we have now, it's quite exciting, again in the southeast, we have recently done some regional mobile baling with IFT, Inspired Forward Thinking. What that allows is, for example, HSFE Yalumba, James Freckleton there, he had about, let's say, 30 or 40 rolls of drip line that had been recoiled using the Netafim recoiler that we have there at Loxton at Lawrence's Irrigation. And it's actually quite difficult to get small amounts like that onto a truck and get that back to one of our recycling partners for recycling. So the mobile baler transformed those rolls of drip line into 3 bales. And if the pictures come up, we might see that. But what that means is that we can then fit a number of bales into a truck. So what we've done is we've sent our mobile baling contractor, Chris from IFT, and his team along to 3 different clients in the southeast who each had smallish amounts of drip line. And typically the truck would have had to have stopped. People would have had to have loaded that in by hand. We've given the guidance on how to do that safely, but it's still a time-consuming task. And certainly baling is far more efficient for the client because they just have to forklift on some bales onto the truck. So that's been a bit of a groundbreaker for us. And it's been really lovely to have trialled it and return back to where it all started in the southeast. We managed to get a nice load of bales from the 3 clients in the southeast to our recycling partner, and I'd say it's been successful for both IFT and Netafim. And the beauty of this is that IFT can leverage other plastic streams that they need, that they can potentially do in the region. It might be sort of plastic containers. But interestingly, one of the things that they really discovered during this trial that we did in the southeast was vine guards. So the plastic vine guards, which are made out of typically polypropylene, they found that there was plenty of demand for them to be able to bale those whilst they were out there also baling for Netafim. So that's been a nice collaborative thing to have seen come out of what we're doing. Obviously, we work very closely with IFT around contracting around just the drip line, but we're really pleased to see that they can get other opportunities that also enhance the benefits for growers in the region. So I guess the other thing to mention is just pricing for our service. We hire the Netafim recoilers out at $100 per day. The hiring process has been very important in allowing us to get the machines well utilised. So growers typically, if they're paying $100 a day, will pick it up the day before they need to use it for a day. If you've only got 20 kilometres to do, you can do that in a day, and then they'll return it the following day. We'll charge them $100. So there's a bit of flexibility there. What the process actually does for us is it ensures that the machines are also, we don't lose parts that go with the machines, which was happening previously. It also means that if there has been a little bit of damage or a bit of wear and tear, we can quickly identify that, and that's been fantastic. We've been able to set up checklists for growers to be able to complete and return to us. It's just been a really good way to make sure that the recoilers are utilised well. The charges for the recycling are very much on a case-by-case basis. It's not something I can disclose here because it's very different for the different clients. We do need to charge. This is not Netafim's core business, and they don't seek to profit from it, but we do need to cover, Netafim Recall, we do need to cover our key expenses, which are largely freight. But we also have other expenses too. So there is a charge. We offer our best pricing to Netafim clients, obviously, but we do assist others as well. Just see, no, the computer's still playing up a little bit. I think that's possibly about it, Robin, unless there was anything. In terms of our results, this year so far, we've had 44 occasions that a Netafim recoiler has been used, or 44 different clients actually. Some of them have been repeat clients, so they might have actually borrowed or hired a recoiler on a number of occasions, but that's 44 clients. That's our recoilers across Australia in 6 different states. So that's been good to see the recoilers being used efficiently and well. We will get a recoiler that's not being used efficiently in one region to a region where there's higher demand than normal. So it's been good to be able to sort of see them efficiently used across and within regions. In terms of our recycling results, we have issued about 25 certificates of recycling. I should just add that to ensure the integrity of what we're doing, which is really important, we make certain claims that we support the circular economy, and that where possible, we take back the resin and use it in closed loop recycling in making new Netafim products at the factory in Melbourne, Netafim factory in Melbourne. These are important claims, so we track everything. We track the drip line consignments that come to our recycling partners from all over different states in Australia. We track the amount of recycled resins that Netafim purchases from our recycling partners, and also the amount that's used in closed loop manufacturing, so by Netafim. And that means that, hand on heart, I can be very proud when we issue certificates of recycling to our clients. So the costs for recycling do vary from client to client, but the clients that have used our service are generally very are always complimentary about it. So I think that it's a good service, and I hope that the information's been useful, and I hope that with the CCA posts that there are elements of what we're doing that can be useful in developing frameworks to combat that significant problem too. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Uma. That was great. Now I'd like to invite everyone else to come back, all of the presenters to jump back on so we can get started into the Q&A session. So we've had quite a few questions that have come up. Firstly, regarding the posts, so do the creosote posts need to be treated differently to the CCA posts? Alex, I might hand that one to you, please.
It really depends on the state that you're in. The current understanding and the regulations are quite vague about this, as it falls in under the same ruling as CCA posts in terms of disposal. So yeah, you need to dispose of them with the same degree of rigor as CCA posts. Having said that, once you get to a process for dealing with them at end of life, so it may be simpler disposing of a Creo post than a CCA post because you haven't got the heavy metals to deal with. But the process that we're looking at developing for CCA would also use the Creo posts that are in the same waste stream. Okay,
great. Thank you. And how much of each copper, chromium, arsenic is there in an end-of-life post compared to a new CCA post? I'll hand that to you, Martin.
Right. It's not possible to really give a definitive answer because it depends on quite a few factors. But we've done a recent study of looking at end-of-life posts that Alex provided from a range of vineyards across South Australia and a range of service lives. And the key element that came out of that was that there is a minimum standard for the quantity of CCA remaining in the timber for it still to be a usable product in terms of defending against termites and etc. And all of the posts met that standard. So yes, they had probably lost some. One of the issues is you don't necessarily know what was originally in there 25, 40 years later. So you can only really evaluate against the standard. And as I say, all of them met the standard. So there was sufficient still retained right across the profile of the log, of the post rather, to still be a usable product for reuse.
Okay, great. Thank you. And a question for you, Mark. If CCA chemicals don't leach from the post, then why is it a danger to bury them? We put 2 foot of wet, fresh posts in the ground, so why is it an issue to put an old, dry post into the ground?
Yeah, look, I did type the answer in there, and research, and Martin probably know about this too, and Alex. Clearly, the chemicals do leach. There's no question about it. They do leach. They may not move too much in certain soil types. If they're near a watercourse, they can very readily move into, or some of them can move very readily into in an aqueous solution. So it is still an issue to put it into the ground because there will be significant material left. If there is water travelling through that hole in the ground, then you are, if it's concentrated, you're adding to the environmental risk and therefore potentially in breach of environmental duty of care Certainly, at least in most jurisdictions, you would be.
Okay, thank you. Now, there's an interesting one here. What are the early results on the different greenhouse gas emissions associated with each type of post? Is it the old chestnut of CCA leaching being a local issue versus climate change mitigation being a global one? Who wants to answer that question? Or do we take that one on notice?
I'll tackle it by saying it's a really wise question, whoever's asked that. And it's one that I don't think the scientific literature is addressed for Australia. So I'll paraphrase that by saying, I haven't seen any evidence of a life cycle analysis for Australian conditions that compares a CCA post where the post is grown in Victoria or South Australia and treated with a steel post that may be imported from somewhere and is galvanized, and the whole life cycle assessment. It would be good for an independent organisation to provide that information.
Okay, does anyone else have anything to add to that answer that Alex gave?
Look, I might just reinforce that. I mean, doing a full life cycle assessment is very complex. But you need to take into account, you do need to consider all these aspects. And yes, it is a chestnut. It's a kind of a local issue. It also runs through the whole supply chain as to where these chemicals, preservative chemicals, are procured and manufactured, how they're manufactured, and also whether they're reused or not later. And this becomes a fairly big issue. There is also the other aspect about greenhouse gas emissions with regards to steel post versus a timber that is actually sequestering it, a timber post that's sequestering it. So you have to balance all these things out. So again, there's no single solution. And if you were doing a life cycle, you would not just necessarily look at greenhouse gas emissions, but you also have to look at environmental impacts. So a life cycle impact assessment needs to cover greenhouse gas emissions, but you got to look at it and say, well, what is the biggest issue? Some people would say climate change is the biggest. Others might say no, it's not. From the data I've seen, I'd probably say yes, it is. So it would be the most important decision for me personally would be based around emissions, but for someone else it might not be. It's a very difficult question to answer.
Yeah, it's a good question though. And from something that you said, Martin, about pyrolysis, we were in the chat section talking about the greenhouse gas emissions associated with pyrolysis, and Alex, you provided a good answer there. Would you share that answer with the webinar participants?
Yeah, sure. The question was whether the pyrolysis process releases emissions. And the best way to answer that, pyrolysis is different than burning. It's very different. It's a very controlled process, very sophisticated process that we're looking at, or others are already doing. And the net result is you produce a biochar, you produce a char, you produce syngas, and you produce a liquid. Overall, it's carbon positive, because if you're processing carbon sources through it, so timber through it, rather than that timber degrading out in the environment, you're converting it into a stable form, which is the biochar. And so you're actually sequestering carbon if it's done right. So the end-of-life solution that we're looking at, one of the options is to strip out the heavy metals from the CCA posts and then convert the residue into a biochar that is clean. That's one of the options that we're exploring. And, that's a few years away and it may not eventuate, but that's, one of the pathways that we're looking at with several processes that have come forward to say that they have the potential to do that.
Yeah, very exciting. Thank you. Now, a question about biosecurity related to moving posts between regions. So Martin, you did touch on it very briefly, but either Martin or Alex, would you like to provide some more information?
I'll chip in there. We would always observe biosecurity protocols going between regions or states. What Martin was getting at is that there are challenges between state regulations being different in even contemplating moving posts across state borders if you could do it. And that would limit our capacity to supply a potential plant with enough CCA timber to make it viable. But we'd always look at the biosecurity protocols.
Okay. Great, thank you. Now, there was a question about, apologies, I've lost it all of a sudden. Yes, you can get a copy of Uma's slides. Thank you, Cheryl. There was a question about fixing broken posts. So Mark, in the chat, you confirmed that broken post fixing options were evaluated. Would you like to speak to that at all?
Yeah, it's actually answered directly by Lian Cheng Li, who is one of the researchers. So she kindly put that in there. Yes, they did look at those, the performance of those, and there was a bit of information about those in the paper. So in the report, the review, desktop review report. So that will be available shortly.
Great, thank you. And recycling old tractor tires, who's up for answering that question? I see you've written an answer in there, Mark. Would you like to share that?
Yeah, just look, I was aware of the product stewardship scheme for tyres called Tyre Stewardship Australia. And so I put that link in there. Although I'm not 100% sure, I'm not the best person to know. Alex might be able to answer this. Do they take tractor tyres? No, that's what I was worried about.
I'm not sure, Mark. I'm not prepared to answer that one.
Don't know. Okay, so the best thing we could do if you've got tractor tyres is you can go to that website and you can search for accredited recyclers or receival sites, and then you have to give them a call and find out if they will take them, or if there's a collection point near you. But there's a little search option in there for the Tyre Stewardship Australia website. So that'd be my recommendation to do that. Very often these days, some of the retailers, when they sell them to you, they will take your tyres and they will then, they'll probably charge you a fee, of course. And I guess that's the point that the question was getting to. Is there any alternative than just paying the fee? I believe overseas that there may be some recycling processing, much along the lines of what we're talking about with potentially for post, but I'm not aware of anything here. I guess Martin might know, or if anyone else would know, but not that I'm aware of. Nope. So that's it.
All right.
Tyre stewardship.
Thank you. And can creosote posts be used as firewood?
Alex, what do you reckon? I'd say ACQ no.
Creo no as well.
I think so.
Yeah, pretty confident of that answer. Yeah, I won't go into the chemistry of it, but I wouldn't be using it as firewood at all.
No.
Yeah, there's issues around any of those treatments, particularly Creo. Some rather nasty chemicals can be produced depending on the temperature. Like we could be talking dioxins and pretty serious stuff. Yeah. So definitely don't use it for your barbecue. Definitely not. Don't burn it under any circumstances. It's a treated timber and it should be managed and handled as a treated timber.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I'd like to thank Ed Massey for jumping in. He's obviously from New Zealand, and he has shared a link to the Repost company over in New Zealand, in Blenheim, in the chat area, if you'd like to jump on and have a look at that. So they have a mobile unit that goes around to Vineyards. It cuts the posts to a certain height. I think they also can put on a point, and then they bundle them up for sale. So yeah, jump on there if you're interested in learning more about that. But thank you very much, everyone, for contributing to the webinar. So, oh, Mark, you wanted to jump in.
Yes, sorry, I thought I better just jump in there. On cutting and handling of CCA timber, this is an area that I've obviously always pretty concerned about with WHS issues, and I'm assuming that Ed's the Repost system does take good care of that. Definitely one of the hazards of CCA posts, and probably one of the greatest, if you do a risk assessment, is from inhaling particles from working the timber and human contact in that area. So you really do need to be very careful about making sure you've got controls and you're managing the risk associated with that, because it is a well-documented and serious hazard that you need to take into account. So I don't know if Ed's got any further information, or either Alex or Martin also.
We might have to follow up. Unfortunately, we can't get Ed to join the webinar. We'll have to follow up with Ed and Repost and provide some information about the health and safety protocols they follow. But thank you for reinforcing that. Now, unless anyone else has anything they'd like to add, I'd like to thank you all of the presenters. So Alex, Mark, Martin, and Uma for presenting today, sharing your information, your knowledge, and your time. And Mark, looking forward to those reports and fact sheets coming out. And thank you, as always, to the participants. Your contributions are really, really valuable to us. And as I mentioned at the start, the webinar is recorded and a link will be sent out to you shortly. We'll also follow up. Thank you, Ed. He's said he will follow up with reposts, so we'll send out that information to everyone. The next webinar is on the 13th of December with Dr. Eric Wilkes from the AWRI, and he will be talking about data to help producers manage new EU labelling requirements. So if you'd like to register for that session, jump onto the AWRI website and register. Thank you again, everyone. It's a great webinar, really, really interesting topic. So thank you for sharing. Thank you.